Why Big Data and Your Permanent Record Finally Matter. Your Passport to a Better Understanding of Your Permanent Record by Tom Seast. My permanent record. I remember when I first heard that I had a permanent record. I was attending the Hopedale grade school in the early 1970s, back when fossils roamed the earth and was kind of not behaving appropriately for my teachers. My misbehavior was usually innocent, as I had trouble hearing and understanding my teachers at the time, but that's a subject for another day. I was fortunate that the principal of the Hopedale grade school at the time was Mr. Frank Roseberry, who was also a neighbor that lived up the street from me, 3 houses away at the time. The permanent record. Mr. Roseberry was a kind, caring man, but had a stern look when needed, along with a pleasant smile. Like anyone who first hears about the permanent record, it was confusing to me. But as I came to understand it, my record was a blank slate, and any time I did something wrong, a note was made on this record which was permanent and could not be removed. So, not like a chalkboard or a marker board that can be erased, but something that permanently would haunt me for the rest of my life. This was back when I had no idea if Santa was real or not, but it seemed like God and Santa were much more forgiving. God and Santa. At the time, I believed in both God and Santa, I suppose. God promised to remove my sins from my permanent record, so I really liked him. And Santa just started a fresh list every year. So, it seemed like the Hopedale grade school was a less forgiving place, as I could have a permanent blemishes on my permanent record. Fortunately, I outlived Hopedale grade school, which has been consolidated and renamed and relocated. The old building is still there, about a half-mile walk from my parents' house. I still wonder if my permanent record lives on in some file cabinet somewhere. Olympia High School. In 1979, I moved on from Hopedale grade school to Olympia High School, and I suspect that my permanent record may have traveled with me. I never saw it, but it could have hidden in the cornfields between my house and the school. It was about that time that the schools were adopting student information systems, and I suppose they even transformed my paper permanent record into some digital form. I was a generally well-behaved lad, or never really got caught, but I suppose some of my teachers may have added to my permanent record. In any case, I never saw it. The permanent record. It seems that when they put the permanent in permanent record, that this is when it becomes more of a veiled threat. As previously discussed, it would seem that Santa and God are far more forgiving than the education system, and now other governmental agencies that are adopting the permanent record. If it wasn't permanent, then no one would care. Permanent impression. Unfortunately, I've made many mistakes in my life and could fill vast vaults with my intentional and unintentional transgressions. And I suppose I have wronged many people and made a bad impression on them. Far more than I could remember or would want to remember. I only hope that they've moved on and found new people to look down on with dissatisfaction. Secret files. John Edgar Hoover, known commonly as J. Edgar Hoover, was the first director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and became famous or infamous because he kept secret files on his enemies or perceived enemies. I can only assume that these records were on paper at first and then transferred to digital form at some point or another. But many would consider these records as permanent, and they're probably hidden in some secret government vault in some government castle somewhere. Permanent records everywhere. So now we have permanent records everywhere. Credit records, bank records, tax records, health records, public records, social media records. We have more records than Mark Spitz or some of the other great Olympians of the past. And while we are making and producing the events that create the records, these records now exist in paper or digital form all over the globe. The vaccine passport. Much is being made about the creation of the new vaccine or immunization passport, as governments promise to restrict my ability to do business, travel, or attend social or public events without the proper papers. But, as I see it, that ship sailed long ago. In this land of the free, I always have to be able to produce my papers and my identification to do just about anything, and I just see this as the next logical step that the master demands of the freed servants. Flawed humans. I know that all the worker bees that maintain these governmental computer systems are flawed human beings, as I am I. So mistakes will be made and people will suffer for the greater good, I suppose. And when my body is buried on the other side of the dirt someday, I suppose they'll use my permanent record to threaten my family for a while, but then I will be quickly forgotten. Permanent records. So, if you're going to maintain lists about individuals that you know, as many of us do, I would encourage you to remember happy things that you like and do your best to find things that you like about those you know. Because if you spend all your time looking for the negative, you'll never see any of the positive. Look up instead of down. Look to help instead of condemn. For we all have permanent records. God forgives. If you believe in God as I do, you'll know He forgives and erases the record. If not, you may be surprised that His standards are easier to understand than those of the smallest government agencies. And He never changes them. In any case, I know that God forgives, and I hope you, the government, and anyone else that has my permanent record will eventually forgive me as God has. Passport to freedom. I have my passport to freedom, and it's the only passport that I own that isn't a veiled threat. I hope you find yours someday too, and can travel again without worry or fear of what they will do to you or your family. If only in our minds we can still have a little freedom and liberty here in the land of the free. Me. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my days on this side of the soil, reminiscing about times both good and bad. And when I ascend to my home beyond the sky and they plant my remains below the earth, I will have done my best. Feel free to follow my ramblings at the links listed below.